Good evening, friends. My name is Bill Harmer, and I proudly serve as the Executive Director of the Westport Library. On behalf of our entire team, I want to extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you for coming out for tonight's program. It gives us great pleasure to continue our partnership with the esteemed wise men of Westport, Weston. Together, we strive to bring forth valuable opportunities like the one we have in store for you tonight with our distinguished guest, Mr. Sam Gustman. Sam serves as the Associate Dean and Chief Technology Officer for the USC Shoah Foundation, as well as the USC Libraries, and we are honored to have him with us tonight. As we gather in the public library, we recognize the significance of this space. We firmly believe in our role as a central hub for the community, a place where individuals of all backgrounds can gather together to learn, grow, and engage in meaningful and respectful discussions like the one we have for you tonight. Once again, I want to express my gratitude to all of you for coming out and joining us this evening. And now, without further delay, it gives me great pleasure to introduce my friend, the first Vice President of the Wise Men, Mr. Bruce Borner.
Before introducing the introducer, the Wise Men of Westport, Weston, would like to plug our fine organization of pleasantly retired and semi-retired, Marvel-quality supermen. We are a 400-strong men's club with 29 subgroups, including tennis, golf, pickleball, bridge, boating, hiking, jazz, books, investments, and more. Our weekly meetings offer talks to members, this year alone by Governor Lamont, gubernatorial candidate Stefanowski, Senator Blumenthal, Chief Technology Explainer David Pogue, best-selling author Ted Aldrich, Westport's hero lawyer Josh Koskoff, Webb and Hubble telescope expert Westporter and wise men Marty Yellen, who is here tonight. But best of all, you'll not find a group of men better informed, generous of spirit, and more ready for adventure. There are brochures in the back for those who might be interested in joining. When we have a talk like the one today, appealing to a wide audience, we often collaborate with the Westport Library, taking full advantage of this incredible space and its highly talented and likable staffers. Thank you, Bill Harmer. Introducing today's speaker will be Wise Men Eiley Rhymes. Eiley joined the Wise Men after moving to Westport about a year ago. Now retired, he had a stellar career in the field of technology, serving as the Chief Information Officer at Ohio State University before becoming Vice Provost of Information Technology for the University of Southern California. Under Eiley's leadership at USC, much was done utilizing advanced technology to advance their information systems, which helps explain how something like the Shoah Foundation gets its wings. I am especially pleased to introduce Eiley, as he and his wife Vera are fellow members of Saugatuck Congregational Church here in Westport. Another shameful plug. Please welcome Eiley Rhymes.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. As the introducer, I will attempt to be brief, be direct, and be seated. Now, good evening. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Sam Gustman as our guest speaker. I met Sam about 16 years ago, in January 2007, to be precise. When I joined the University of Southern California, I discovered that the technology group for the Shoah Foundation was a part of the CIO's group, and Sam was the head of that group, and as a result of that, he ended up reporting to me. And we had a great relationship over the years that we worked, and I have a lot of good things to say about Sam, although he told me to be careful. At the time that I joined USC, Sam's group was in the process of converting the testimonies that they had into digital technology in order to get ready for the creation of the Shoah Visual History Archives. And you'll hear Sam talk quite a bit about that when he comes up here. And he's going to show demonstrations that actually use that archive. Now, Sam was a self-starter. I didn't have to micromanage him. He was competent. And what was most impressive was he had a passion for his work. And as a result of that, I should say in addition to that, he had a way of getting you to get passionate about what he was doing. And it worked on me because I recall talking to Sam's former boss, Stephen Smith. And Stephen asked me, he said, "Eiley, you're a technology guy. Do you enjoy being involved with an organization like Shoah and doing the things that you're doing?" And I said, "Stephen, what Shoah has done for me is made me believe that I can use technology to make a difference." And so that's really, I think, was very important. Now, Sam oversees the operation, preservation, and cataloging of testimonies in Shoah's Visual History Archives, which is one of the largest publicly accessible video databases in the world, over 55,000 testimonies. He is responsible for integrating that archive into USC's library electronic resources. Sam has a BS in computer engineering from the University of Michigan, a Master's of Science in Instructional Design and Technology from Walden University. He has served as primary investigator on numerous grants from the National Science Foundation. He is the inventor on 16 patents, a recognized thought leader in his field, and a sought-after consultant to major entities such as the Library of Congress and DreamWorks, by the way. Now, let me stop here because there are really too many examples to discuss at this point about things that he's accomplished. Now, Sam's talk today, titled "Humanity Through Technology," will include a variety of demonstrations to underscore the power of visual history archives and the various ways that it is being used by subscribers. So please join me in welcoming one of the most talented and creative individuals that I have had the pleasure of working with, Sam Gustman.
Well, there's a lot of people to thank, and it's wonderful to be here. The Westport Library, this is amazing. The Wisemen, thank you for having me here. All of the folks in the back booth doing all the audio-visual work, unbelievable. But, it's great having, being with Eiley, spending time with Eiley, having had him as my boss. I just remember my weeklies with Eiley. He'd always do this thing where the first 2 minutes of every hourly meeting you'd have with him, that was your weekly, he would tell you all the good things you're doing. And you felt amazing after those first 2 minutes. And there was no promise what was going to happen the next 58 minutes. But those first 2 minutes were amazing. So I'm being taken back to my original weekly meetings with Eiley. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for everything. For the video folks, is it possible for me to switch back over to, everything fell asleep here. Hold on a second. There we go. So, hi everybody. My name's Sam Gustman. I'm Associate Dean of the USC Libraries and the Chief Technology Officer of the USC Shoah Foundation. I've been with the Shoah Foundation for 29 years. Shoah is the Hebrew word for the Holocaust, and it was started by Steven Spielberg after the movie Schindler's List. I'm going to play a little video first, just to sort of introduce you and get everybody grounded in what the Shoah Foundation is. So if the team back in the video stand can play the introductory video first.
Making Schindler's List was an experience that truly changed my life. Filming just outside the gates of Auschwitz-Birkenau, I realized that had I been standing on that exact spot at a different point in time, I more than likely would have been killed too. I remember talking to a lot of survivors during the production. How did you survive?
By miracle.
It was one of the first moments that made me realize that there were many, many stories that needed to be told. That's how the Shoah Foundation began.
Gathering the original collection was an enormous undertaking. It involved efforts to collect testimonies from 56 countries in 32 languages.
The location is London, England.
Henryk Mandelbaum, w języku polskim.
I'm at an age where I don't know how much longer I'll be here. I felt it's important that it's not forgotten.
The survivors who give us their stories trusted us to hold on to those stories and teach with them far into the future. So it's our responsibility to preserve them, to make sure that they're here now and 100 years from now.
My first goal was to deny the deniers who had been saying on many, many occasions the Holocaust never happened.
Anti-Semitism has never gone away. Every now and then it surges up.
He said the Jews must die. That was nothing new to me. We have gone through this for 2,000 years. For me, it's never over.
We have a moral obligation to the survivors who entrusted us with their memories to see through their wishes for a world without anti-Semitism, in a world without genocide or atrocity crimes.
Building on our original collection, we've expanded the archive to be more inclusive of various different survivor testimonies across the 20th and 21st centuries.
I never talked about the genocide of Tutsi. I always said genocide because it can happen anywhere in the world.
All these examples of intolerance and racial hatred have to be taught.
We're going to be listening to individual stories because history happens to individuals.
Two little boys came, and they were looking at my father, just staring at him. The one said, well, we were told when you look a Jew in the eye, you can see the devil in there. He says, I just wanted to see if that's true. A little 8-year-old kid.
For decades, the Shoah Foundation has been at the forefront of the ethical use of technology to reach audiences in ways that change the way they think and understand these subjects.
We build resources to bring these histories to light. Dimensions in testimony, mobile applications, and immersive testimony on location enable learners to interact with survivors and engage deeply with their stories.
The Eyewitness platform really helps history come alive by hearing the stories of many different people that have gone through traumatic experiences.
We need to engage with and learn from these experiences in order to understand the world today and to shape a better world to come.
It is our obligation as survivors to make sure the world remembers.
We have a message. We were there. We can talk about it.
When you see an injustice, stand up and speak up and take a stand.
The best way to prevent genocide is to fight denial.
Try to understand each other. And if you cannot love each other, at least respect each other.
I've seen young people, young students who have seen these testimonies. It does change them. And that always gives me hope that the more we get this out into the world, thousands and someday millions of young people will be in some way changed by this. And these survivors who are now educators, they can change the world.
Thank you. If the video group can switch back to my laptop here. So, thank you for listening to that. That's an introduction to who we are. Started by Steven Spielberg in 1994, and then moved to the University of Southern California in 2006, where we integrated into the university to continue our mission. We expanded our mission to collecting other genocides. We're on our 14th collection, actually. We started looking at doing interviews in the Ukraine, and I'll talk a little bit about that. in a bit. But we make two promises, and we have two things that we do. And the two promises we made to the survivors is that we will save their interviews throughout time, and that we'll educate using their testimonies throughout time to try and humanize people to other people using their stories so that we can hurt each other less. And so I'm going to go through examples of the different types of systems we put out to universities, schools, other kinds of groups, show you how it all works, and go from there. So the first one's called the Visual History Archive, and the reason I'm showing this is because it's nicely shows how, from the beginning, when we started the Shoah Foundation, the web was first coming out, and the idea was we're going to collect all these videos, we're going to turn them into clips, and we're going to make each clip searchable like it was its own web page. And so we did that. We actually collected interviews at a rate of almost 12,000 a year from 1994 through 2000. And I do want to make a shout out because I got introduced to one of the interviewers who actually helped us. If you could stand up for 1 second. And how many interviews did you do? She did about 105 interviews, so thank you for being here and coming and introducing yourself to us. Yeah, so the Bernard family is all here, and that's fantastic. And so I'd like to talk about this Visual History Archive now, where we're now able to show at universities. We're able to go through all 120,000 hours of material, minute by minute, clip by clip, and querying it. And so it's not just moving through the Holocaust testimonies, but we have all of these various collections that we've been doing. Pain is pain, hate is hate, and the stories have similarities but differences between things like the Nanjing Massacre and the Armenian Genocide and the Holocaust. But let's jump in and take a look at what this looks like as researchers start to move through the material. So this is the Visual History Archive, and what I can do here is just, in 44 languages that we collected, start typing things in, like food, hiding, Auschwitz, and I can do a search. And it's looking through all these testimonies in all these languages, and it's found 5,238 testimonies in 44 languages where someone talks about food hiding in Auschwitz. And researchers will then start to narrow things down from there. Well, I'm going to only grab the ones that I can speak in English and apply those. Let me go get some that have transcripts that'll make it a little bit easier for us to all go through and read. Oop, what happened there? Let me do the query again. Food hiding. Having internet issues, of course, right, as we're doing that. One more time. So, it looks like, I'm struggling a little bit with the internet here, but that's okay. Let me see if I can get it to work. So now what I'm able to do is I'm able to go in to one of these interviews, and you see these numbers here. These are the minutes in the interview where we actually talk about various topics in the interview. So if I'm interested in how they got food when they were in the ghettos, like the index at the back of a book, instead of page numbers, I can click minute numbers, and I'm able to go in and start looking at the video. Let me see if I can get the internet thing to work for me really quickly here. There we go. Great.
Mother's condition was terrible. She was in and out of consciousness. Already she was on that floor, in that filthy floor, full of lice. You could sweep the lice of us. It was so much. and really it was, she was in a terrible, terrible state.
Did she recognize you?
not towards the end. I remember, I remember saying to her, "Mommy, you must eat whatever I can find." I couldn't find, to give you strength. Yes, to give you strength. And this is what I kept saying to her. And she told me that I must be strong as well when she could speak. I must be very strong, and that I must look after myself and things like that, you know.
So here Magda's talking in this clip about her mother starving in the camps, trying to find food for her and her mother. And we can look at all kinds of different things around this interview now. We can go in, excuse me while I struggle with the, we can go in and see a little bit about the interview itself. We could see all of the different topics talked in this interview and what minute they're talked about, like an index at the back of a book. If I want to hear her talk about adoptions, I can click on minute 69 and jump in here and talk about adoptions. We can hear about all the people that she mentioned, son-in-laws, aunts, cousins, daughter-in-laws. And by clicking on any of these numbers, we would jump to the moment in the video where she talks about that particular person.
Stephen was born in 1954.
And we not only can move around by keywords or people's names throughout the archive, but we can look through images. A lot of the survivors will show images during their interviews. And we can go through and take a look here at images they may show. And we could jump to the moment in the video where they may talk about something in particular. So here, we're going to hear Magda talk about when she got her tattoo.
Camp B again and ask you some questions. Apart from the number on the Star of David that you were given in Camp A, did you have any other means of identification as an inmate of the camp?
Well, eventually, whilst I was in Auschwitz, I don't know exactly when, but we were all given these tattoo numbers on my, you know.
Do you mind sharing the camera?
Yes.
And what is your number?
My number is A6166. 61, 66. A61, 66. And that was tattooed there we had to line up once again, and there were rows of people standing there, and they tattooed it with a pen.
Did you know that it was a tattoo?
Yes, we knew we were going to get a number. And of course...
So, for the entire archive, all 120,000 hours of material, every minute is searchable by these keywords, people's names, latitude and longitudes. We had staff, we had over 100 catalogers and indexers sitting in trailers on the back lot of Universal Studios, originally going through and listening in the native language in 44 different languages, keywording all this content. And it took from 1998 through 2005 to get everything indexed and searchable. And now we use AI and other things to try and do that for some of the new interviews. But this gave us the basis to begin to teach using the testimony as we highlighted everything. So let me go back to the presentation for a moment. One of the things that we ran into quite early is that, unfortunately, everything rots. You know, conservatively, we would like to keep the testimonies around for many, many decades, if not hundreds of years. But the newer the technology, the faster it rots. So if film, you get approximately 50 years before you see age-based rot, videotape 20 years, hard drives 5 years, data tape 3 years, DVD like optical 2 years. The newer the tech, the faster it's disappearing, which is wonderful for tech companies that sell storage and terrible if you're a collection that wants to keep your information around. So we had to start building systems that would allow for the digital preservation. And our goal kind of were these things that we called super texts. So we've had reading and writing for 5,000 years, and you have like the Bible, the Quran, the Torah. Those have lasted for thousands of years, Shakespeare, hundreds of years. And the question was, what would need to be done to be able to turn the audiovisual content and give it a chance to become a supertext? So what we did is we built data centers all around the world. And we did that with USC. We've got a couple copies for those that like numbers. It's 6 petabytes of data at USC for the collection. We've got copies at Clemson. We've got copies in Prague. We've started putting copies on various cloud technology vendors, and we're using different kinds of technologies to preserve this information. So one of the things, the way that we do that is through a key. There are these things, and I'm only going to do a little bit of this deep dive tech so I could set up for the rest of it. You can take any file, set of 1s and 0s, run it through an algorithm called the Shaw algorithm, and you get a unique number. And if you ever run that file through that algorithm and you get a different number, you know it's starting to rot. Probably because the media is going bad or something's going wrong. And what we do is we start to use that number and run it constantly against all the video files to look for places of damage. And when they are damaged, we go to another site, grab it, copy it to the other site where the damaged versions are starting to be, and we have a system where it's called preservation through migration. We're constantly copying the files as they're rotting on various pieces of media to keep them going. And that's what you have to do today with digital technology to make it last for longer periods of time. So we have these things in place, and the Shaw value is going to become important later on because I'll start to talk a little bit about blockchain and other kinds of technologies that are used. But basically, there are technologies around these keys that are used to stop deep fakes, to prove that the original content you take is the original content. When we go to Ukraine and places like that, which I'll talk about, those keys are used to prove that the video we take can be used in a court of law, like the ICC, and I'll go into that a bit as we move forward. But one of the other things we sort of realized is that there's no promise of technology for keeping this information around. So diversification was key. We started to treat preservation of the video like we do, and keeping the promise of preserving the video like we would run a financial portfolio. We want to diversify across different technologies, different organizations, different ways of doing things, so that if there's a major malfunction in one particular area, we can go in and use a copy from one of the other systems to update and refresh that. So currently today, we use a lot of data centers that are synchronized through fiber optics and online to keep the key for each digital video file synchronized across different locations. But we're looking at blockchain, and what blockchain does for us is it allows us to, at the point of collection, take that key, that Shaw value, move it into preservation, track it over time, and then when someone turns something into an NFT, you may have heard of NFTs, when it gets minted, that key can show you that you have that original object unchanged. And that becomes very important to know as you start to access content, whether it's been changed at all. And journalists and others are starting to really rely on this technology to make sure they have the original content from the time it was originally collected. And then there's starting to be long-term media, DNA, glass, other kinds of things that people are starting to store things on. Nothing that anyone can trust long-term at the moment, but they're promising. And so we are diversifying locations, kinds of organizations, kinds of technologies to try and give the video a chance to be a supertext in the long run. And I did talk a little bit about Web3 and blockchain, and the only reason I do is because it's becoming important in our latest collections, like in Ukraine, where we would like to be able to use some of the imagery we take, some of the video we take, hand it into the international criminal courts, and allow them to use that to prosecute people that may need to be prosecuted in the future. But to do that, when you capture, you have to have that key from the beginning. You have to be able to prove when and where that piece of content was taken. You then have to be able to store it and make sure that it has not changed over time, and that the key is the same from the time you've taken it all the way through the time you preserve it. And you need to be able to supply that key publicly. And we use what's called blockchain technology to help people verify those keys. So if they get a copy of a video, they can look at this public blockchain and check if the key is changed and if they have the original asset. And this is actually a partnership that we've been doing with Stanford Engineering. We've named the project Starling after those birds that all come apart and then come back together in those forms of shapes. Thought we were clever. Anyway. Now what I'd like to do is show you another user interface that's used in schools, where we have access to about half the high schools in the US through a learning management system called Eyewitness. And this supplies many different, hundreds of different ways for teachers to teach about humanity, not just using Holocaust testimonies, but using testimonies from many different kinds of genocides, all the various ones we've been collecting. And what we have is we have content where you can watch on various different topics as you're moving through. We have various briefs on things like the Armenian genocide, the Cambodian genocide, et cetera, to help teachers with teaching what these different mass atrocities were and why they matter, and how humanizing people, you know, as human beings, we're able to hurt other folks when we don't humanize them, when we dehumanize them, when we use language that turns them into something less than human, calling them animals or worse. And we push lessons that do the opposite, try and humanize other people to other folks. It's much harder to hurt someone you feel is another human being instead of something else that you've heard through online or radio communications or whatever. So in these activities that the teachers use, we have 594 prepared in many languages for many different teachers. And what the teachers will do is they'll go in and they'll figure out what kind of output they want. I started filling out one that is we give the kids a video editor and teach them video editing skills at the same time, and digital literacy skills around that. At the same time, we're teaching them about what genocide is, what hate is. And this one is Personal Strength to Survive. It's about resistance. And so, and once you enter into this activity, there's a bunch of content that the teacher will have put together, that they'll have cut out of the archive, that the students will be going through and answering questions about. And so I'll just play a clip here from Roman Kent.
In ghetto, there was a creation of a certain, call it a communist movement. And some of the leaders in the communist movement, some of them were very good friends of mine that we went to school together. They organized, and particularly our resort was excellent to it, that we did what we would call here in the United States like slow down strikes. When the management wanted us to do 10 pieces a day, we would do only 2. And we realized that the management would be afraid to do anything to us, because if they openly would say that, hey, you've got a slowdown strike, they would be punished by the Germans. So in a way, we were playing them against the Germans, and we are saving our lives by very low production. So I say this because in many instances I heard so many times being said that the Jews didn't do anything. They went like a sheep to the ovens. But it's not true, because this was also a resistance. Resistance does not have to be with a gun and a bullet. As a matter of fact, sometimes the easiest resistance is with a gun and a bullet. But many times the consequences of taking a gun and shooting a German would be that they would take 100 other people and kill them.
So the students are going through content like this, answering questions, integrating with it, and it's a lot of students. We have, I just pulled up the numbers, 250,000 educators who've used the system, a little over 17 million students, and in 100+ countries. So you go through the content, and then after you've gone through the content as a student, you then are asked to begin querying the content, bringing things back. So if you're interested as a student in food during the ghettos, you'd go and click here, do a quick search, bring up clips of video, and what you could do is watch those clips and save them to your library.
What were conditions like living there?
It was the conditions, it was the general conditions in larger ghetto. The greatest thing was the hunger. Apart from time to time, where the Germans demanded people to be sent out from ghetto, we worked, and the most difficult thing in ghetto was that we got the rations once a week, or once every 8 days, when it was.
So once you've found a clip that you're interested, you save it. And then you would go back, and as a student, you'd go and learn how to construct. You would learn video, you would get video tutorials on how to use a video editor, how to do ethical editing. And then moving through that, you'd launch a video editor. And as you launched the video editor, you'd be able to grab clips that you'd been saving, pulling them into the video editor, as well as your own content, and starting to put together your own programs. We have a challenge where we've had, thousands of students competing across the country and trying to put together videos that are meaningful in their community, and the winners get to come to gala and be awarded by various dignitaries who come and give them their awards. But we're constantly coming up with new ways to get kids engaged with the material, and a lot of videos get created on immigration and other areas that are pretty impactful for them, that they find similar stories from in the testimonies. So let me go back here. And start talking about other ways that we start to engage with kids and others in the public. Human beings for hundreds of thousands of years, we've communicated by talking close to each other, back and forth. And we've only had reading and writing for 5,000 years. And we've only had audiovisual materials for 140 years. And so as the survivors passed, sorry, I gotta get closer to the microphone. I keep walking away from it. So as the survivors passed, we've been trying to figure out, what do we do? Because the most powerful thing is having someone from one of these genocides walk into a classroom and tell their story. So we started to try and use AI and other things and holographic technology to try and recreate the experience as much as we can of a survivor in a classroom or in a museum speaking with people. And I'll show you what that looks like. So we've gone and interviewed people using what are called light stages, these 3D stages, so that we can, and not just from Holocaust survivors, but Nanjing Massacre, many of the different genocides. We've started to do interviews of people. And what we're able to do is we ask them questions, but we ask them in a way that feed an artificial intelligence system, so that we start to get a more human interaction as we start to query the actual interviews. So here I can go, let me just test it. Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Can you tell me about your family?
I was extremely close to my family. My family, before the war, was my life. I mean, everything, was surrounded. My whole being was kind of like enveloped by my family. Every day's activities, from getting up in the morning and having water by the bed and wiping, my eyes, with water, which you have to do if you're a religious Jew, and then all activity. My grandfather going down to the wine cellar, playing in the yard with other Jewish children, going to the cheder, the holidays, every weekend, which meant the Sabbath. The Sabbath was a real holiday. It wasn't just a holy day, it was a holiday. It was both. I mean, I was looking forward to actually running to the baker, collecting the cholent for lunch on the Sabbath. So basically, I was extremely close and surrounded by such loving kindness, both from my immediate parents, my father and my mother, but for everybody else, aunts and uncles and cousins. And I mean, we were over 150 members that I could actually touch in Lodz. So it was I was very close to my family.
What happened to your family?
Unfortunately, from my immediate family, nobody survived. In other words, my parents, my mother, my father, and my sister, my twin sister, they were murdered the same day when we arrived at the death camp and concentration camp Majdanek. But after the war, I found that out of over 150 family members, extended ones, 4 cousins remained alive.
So again, everything that we're doing through technology is trying to humanize as much as we can the stories of these survivors to students and to others, because humanizing people is what will stop people from killing each other in the long run and stop these atrocities. So, or as long as we keep trying to humanize. It's not something we're born with, it's something that's trained, so we have to keep training it. It's like reading and writing. You don't come out of the womb being a loving, caring person. You have to keep that up. You have to keep working on it. And so we try and help with that. It also was mentioned that I'm in charge of the libraries at USC. We take a lot of the technologies that we build for the Shoah Foundation, and we try and make them available for other collections of interest, other work that's being done. So we've partnered with the Bass Archives, as an example, at USC through the libraries. This is Laura King, Rodney King's daughter, and we've started doing interviews with the children of civil rights folks, so you can hear their stories. Laura's an amazing speaker, but let me ask her a few questions here. Can you tell me about your father?
My dad was extremely goofy. He was very spontaneous. He loved to ski. He loved to play baseball. He loved to surf. Things like that. He was very spontaneous, literally, like on the spot. Like, come on, let's go skiing. It's 10 at night. We're waking up in the morning. What? Huh? And he was very good at everything that he wanted to do, by the way. And if he wasn't, he got good at it.
What happened to your father? What happened to your father?
What happened to my father on March 3rd, 1991, he was out celebrating. He had just got a construction job, which was paying well off. And he was smoking marijuana with his friends, and he was a driver of 3 different fellow friends and family members. And they were going for a drive to celebrate. And then, you know, he naturally drove fast. He drove fast. So when he noticed the police were behind him, he sped up and was looking for a well-lit area to pull over because, again, this type of thing happened to African-American males often. My father's beating wasn't the first. Like, this was a normal behavior. So he knew that it was a possibility when he got pulled over that he would be beaten because in, you know, Altadena, California, that was normal. They would take the guys, take them up the hill, beat them. Some of them would come back. Some of them wouldn't. Some of them would come back and never the same mentally again. So he tried to pull over to a well-lit area so that way if anyone sees it or, you know, there could be lights there or someone could see it if something happened. And, you know, the original police officers that pulled him over on the incident, they got pushed to the side. So the fellows that beat him knocked those guys out the way and said, we got it from here. And the original officers had it under control. But they wanted to prove a point, you know, so they took over and beat my dad. You know, he had over 50 broken bones. His eye socket was busted. His jawline was fractured. His eye was completely out of socket. He had bruises. You know, they tased him in his own blood. So you can imagine what kind of night it was. And, you know, he had broken bones, so literally he was trying to run away, but he couldn't walk because his legs were broken.
So we've been expanding this technology to other collections, not just this, but also our search systems, our learning systems, our preservation systems. We have many different collections that we're helping preserve as people are collecting interviews around the world. Because one of the issues is people don't know after they collect it and digitize it that it's actually rotting even faster than if they had stored it on original film or something. So we're constantly helping various groups try and save, preserve, provide access to their collections of importance. So going back to the presentation, we also are working on technologies so that as people go to various physical spaces, you're able to find out what happened there. If you go throughout Europe to where a lot of the mass graves or mass killings were, there's nothing there. There's grass, there's some garbage maybe. There's many efforts to try and put headstones there that have something as simple as a QR code that will allow you to find out what happened at this site. And we also have it on phones, this iWalk, so if you walk by an area, you can hear what's happened. And we want to enable this technology as people go places. You can also use it to find out what happened in places that you're interested in, and you don't have to be there. But if you pass a place of interest and there's something of significance there, we want to be able to tell you about it. So now we get to new collections. One of the things that has occurred is that a lot of the survivors that wanted to give interviews in the 90s, they weren't comfortable telling all of those stories. We didn't quite get all those stories. Some of them are have to do with terrible topics that were harder to talk about than they are now. So we're opening up a last chance collection, and we're trying to interview as many survivors that want to still be interviewed as possible. There's something called the Claims Conference that has a list of 180,000 people that are paid by the country of Germany still for reparations for what was done to them during the Holocaust. And we're working with that list to see if any of those folks are still interested in giving their story. And so we've partnered with groups like TV stations. There's something called the National Association of Broadcasters, and there's a lot of different broadcast groups under it. And we've made it so that survivors can start walking into TV stations, give their interview, and the TV stations will upload those interviews to us. We're also, the technologies for going into the home and doing good interviews are getting better and better, and we're continuing to work on those. This gentleman in the bottom here is Judah Samet. He survived the Holocaust, but he was also a member of the Tree of Life Synagogue, where a number of people were shot, including Holocaust survivors. So we are interviewing survivors of current anti-Semitic acts at the moment. Unfortunately, there is this intersection of survivors who are suffering from current anti-Semitism, and that's a little bit where we've started, but we're expanding from there into the various survivor communities of some of these hate-based actions. But I had mentioned also Ukraine. We've started doing work there. And let me talk a little bit about some of the new things that we're doing. From a technology perspective, I'm going to start from the bottom of this list because I think it's more important. Going into Ukraine, places like that, using the technology we have to interview folks and let them know and humanize the effect of what's actually happening there to these folks as they get slaughtered by the Russians. We want people to know, we want people to see those interviews. We want to be able to take the evidence of what's occurring, bring it to courts when people are trying to get away with murder, literally, today. And we're doing more interviews. We're starting to get into policy around, USC's opened up a Washington, D.C. campus, policy around teaching, where these kinds of humanizing efforts get taught, how things get mandated at the state level. We all know in our politics today, there's all kinds of combat around that at the political level, and how we humanize each other, and we're stepping into that with USC on the policy-making level. More teaching, coming up with more lessons in eyewitness, expanding what we do with eyewitness to all kinds of different groups with all kinds of different collections and testimonies and experiences, expanding what we do with the interactive interviews, getting them into more museums, more places for people to see, to hear these stories. Maps, you know, I talked about the iWalks where you can go to locations, but letting people know something terrible happened here, regardless of what the event was. You know, we have places in the US, you walk through Tulsa, other locations that we would want to know about. This kind of technology is really to let people know something happened here. You should know about it. Let me tell you. And then for me on the tech side, I like sustainable technology, greener technology. And one of the greenest possible technologies coming out is quantum computing. I won't go into it too much other than to say that it's not going to be great for a lot of things, but what it is great for is cryptologic algorithms, basically the things that we use for that key when we collect something, when we preserve something, and when we access it to prove that it hasn't been changed. Quantum computing allows that to happen much faster with using much less electricity. And so we're working also on greener computing as these collections get larger and larger and larger, harder to process. And happy to talk to anyone about qubits, but I won't do it now. And so why don't I open up to questions?
Folks, if you'd like to ask a question, I'm over here. I'm the short guy with the gray hair. I have listened to all of the discussion of the technology. What impressed me most, and I'm sure has impressed you, is the need for humanity. If you have a question, do come up and ask it.
So would I be able to get onto this and look up background of my parents?
Absolutely.
And in Boca Raton, Florida Atlantic University is opening a Holocaust Center. So their students there would be able to go into the building that's
Yeah, in fact, FAU is one of the first places to open the VHA to their entire college student population. Love FAU.
And how do I access this at my own computer at home?
vha.usc.edu.
I got to write it down.
Thank you for such an interesting presentation. Brought up a question in my mind. A number of years ago, I had a friend from this community, well, a woman I knew from this community who was a psychologist. Her name was Dr. Sarah Hertz. And she worked for or did interviewing for Yale University. So Yale is close to home. And I would like to know something more about your connection, if any, with Yale. Is it one of these data gathering places that does the interviews and passes it on to you? I don't understand the connections.
Yale are kissing cousins to us. They also have done a collection, an enormous collection of 6,000 interviews. And they had started doing interviewing before we came along, but Steven Spielberg had a specific process in mind and volume in mind and wanted to get it done and spent about $300 million to get it done and build out this 60,000 testimony collection. So we partner with Fortunoff Archives when we can. They also have wonderful technologies for moving through their interviews, and we all try and share what we can amongst each other, but they are, they're partners in crime. Hi.
Hi, I'm a history educator, so this was really terrific, thank you. I have a question about our country is sort of devolving in states banning works by Jewish authors, Black authors, authors of the LGBTQ community, and stifling education, especially for history teachers. How is the Shoah Foundation sort of supporting our history teachers, our teachers, and pushing back against censorship?
Well, as I said, the areas we're starting to dive into are policy. I think at the government level, it can't be said enough what work has to be done. You see what's happening at state level legislatures, and working both federally and on the state level is becoming a paramount part of what we need to do. As important as the education aspect, although the education aspect is still very important, and we need to grow both sets of efforts. And that's where our executive director starts to look at the pie of where the fundraising is and where do we put all the different kind of money for these things. But we are diving at each one and trying to go after each one as much as we can. While we do the collections, while we do the education, while we do the policy, you have to end up we have to figure out how to do all of them at once. But they're all important and they're all new. And you think we started this 30 years ago and you think it would get better, but not even close. Hi there.
Hey, your presentation was deeply impactful on quite a few levels. What really struck me was the way you spoke about the degradation of the media, and that was something I was completely unaware of. I was always taught, recently, that you want to transfer your film to digital, that way you have it forever. But from what you're saying, the opposite is almost true. So do you guys are you constantly reproducing those again and again and again? Is that how you keep them from degrading?
So I'll go over it one more time. So we have that key that we get with each file that tells us whether it's degrading or not. And what we do is we have many copies of the archive in different places. And every evening we look at a whole bunch of video files and we check that key. And if the key is changed, let's say that it changed in space 1, we'll go over to space 2, make sure it's okay. If it is, we'll load a brand new piece of media up in space 1, copy the good one there, and then take the piece of media that's having trouble and throw it in the garbage.
And you do that in perpetuity? In
perpetuity. It's preservation through migration. And we actually make this through the library as a service that others use. We have a very large cinema school and other things at USC. Warner Brothers uses our infrastructure to preserve their testimonies, Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences, and others. And so we are sharing technologies with others, trying to tackle this problem of digitization is actually very good for high-speed access, terrible for long-term preservation. Hi.
Hi, wonderful presentation. And before I ask you my technical question, I'll just say my wife, Nicole, who's hiding here somewhere with our 9-year-old and reading, actually worked for the Spielberg Foundation when they instituted the Shoah Foundation.
Oh, great.
Way back in the day. But my technical question is, if I understand what I saw correctly, you used AI to ask questions of those folks in the red chairs?
Yeah, gosh, to be gruff about it, they are chatbots with original video training the AI, the chatbot AI, like the one that you might ask online. And it responds. So we'll interview those survivors for 3 to 5 days, get all that content, feed it into the AI chatbot, and it is responding with original video content on what's been said, but with the best possible response to whatever the question is.
Right, so my question is this, because I understand it a little bit too well. Given deep fakes and everything else, and this is wonderful technology, how do I authenticate that the response actually goes back to a golden source or a proper source and it wasn't a hallucination by the AI, for example?
So when we do stuff, we actually are playing back originally recorded video, unchanged from the survivor. So we're just playing back clips, but making it look like you're having a conversation. And those are original clips that we can go back to those keys and prove that they have not been changed. Hi.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. It's very moving. I only had a question about cybersecurity and how do you prevent somebody from coming into the system and in some way degrading the material or posting something racist or generally involving themselves in a way that would harm the content and the integrity of what the project is doing?
So we keep 2 different infrastructures to the chagrin of our budget folks, because one is for access, because we want everyone to watch the testimony. If you want to come in and do something with testimony, good or bad, we want you to see it. And so we have access systems that are completely separate from the preservation systems. The preservation systems we worry because every mass atrocity or genocide has deniers. For Armenia, when we started collecting existing Armenian testimonies and preserving them, we had the ambassador from Turkey show up saying we were doing terrible things. In Rwanda, you have a group of Tutsis who are in charge of Rwanda, but there's countries run by the Hutus who did the massacre in Rwanda surrounding them that say, no, we did not do what you said we did, you horrible people. And so every one of these genocides has got deniers, and all of them would love to destroy the interviews. And so a large part of what I do is testing, auditing, making sure that our preservation systems are not easily destroyed. And I have a couple techniques for that. When I said using different technologies for different copies, that's one of the techniques. So one of the kinds of technologies we use are really slow data tape, so that if somebody tried to do like a ransomware attack or encrypt it or they couldn't. It would take forever. They just can't get at it. Now, it takes us a long time to get at it too, but that slowness is a level of prevention from somebody coming in and doing anything other than putting a bomb in the room. And so different technologies, different kinds of organizations. We try and have a nonprofit and for-profit cloud that holds our technology, different locations, but we live in an age where people are destructive and we have to be vigilant.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi.
Yeah, hi. I have a question about the preservation discussion that was had earlier. There are a number of companies, a number of government agencies that have to preserve documents and preserve materials. The one that comes to mind is the Copyright Office, that has a copy of just about anything that's been copyrighted in the last 100 years. Have you talked with any of these corporations or the government as to how they do their preservation? And when you talked about sharing, is this an interchange that you have with these kinds of agencies and companies? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to say something that's not quite sharing. So I spent 2005 through 2010 with some of my team from the Shoah Foundation at the Culpeper facility for the Library of Congress, where they got $250 million to digitize all the film, video, and audio in the country that's copyrighted. And we actually we said we're gonna come help, but we want to take a copy of that back to the Shoah Foundation. And that became the basis of our digitization and preservation system. And so we've changed that to meet the needs that we have, which are very different than the copyright group's needs. But I think we all started in a very similar place in the early 2000s on what to do about the fact that all this digital information was showing up and it was all disappearing faster than anyone wanted it to.
Thank you.
Are you asking a question or are you up there?
I'm vamping till ready. Are there any more questions?
Yeah, hold on a second. Let me do this for you.
We have one more question on his way.
So the URL is vha.usc.edu.
Thank you very much for coming. It was for me, it was extremely moving and very informative. My question is that I've always thought that Yad Vashem was the depository of Holocaust-related, and I was wondering about your relationship with Yad Vashem, also maybe talking about the preservation of artifact and video presentation there, because they have quite an extensive video collection there as well.
Yeah, they have a copy of everything we have. It's another location. They do things a little differently than we do, and we're happy for them to do it the way that they do, but they are also, like Fortunoff Archives, kissing cousins in this space. We are hyper-focused on collecting testimony and using testimony as an organization, whereas Yad Vashem I would call sort of very large generalists in the area, and so that's where we fit in.
Sam, thank you very much. This was very enlightening, and I think we'll all say the same. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you to Eiley Rhymes for organizing it. Thanks.